He kept it in his wallet for 17 years. I didn't recognize the handwriting until I realized it was mine. A folded square of notebook paper, yellowed at the creases, soft from being carried so long it had taken on the curve of a man's hip pocket. When he unfolded it under the lamp on that stage in Hackney, the room went so quiet I could hear the warmth humming inside the bulbs. I almost threw it all away the night before he walked in. Every record, every page, every line I had ever written by hand. I had even sealed the envelope, addressed the stamp, set it on the kitchen table where the morning light would find it. I was 62 years old, and I had decided very calmly that the kindest thing I could do for my own music was to bury it before someone else did. What I did not know, what I could not have known, was that a stranger in a soft navy jumper had been carrying a piece of me around the city of London for half my adult life, and he was on his way to the door. If you have ever believed, quietly, in the dark, that the work of your hands no longer counts, then sit with me for an hour. There is something I needed to learn before I could tell you, and it begins with a wooden box, a brass key, and a record that knew more than I did. In the autumn of 2013, I was 62, and the world had decided I was a museum exhibit. Not a cruel decision, not even a deliberate one. The world had simply turned a corner I had not seen, and when I looked up from my guitar, the corner was already 3 streets behind me. I lived in Walthamstow then, in a narrow terraced flat on a road of slate roofs that turned silver in the rain. Every evening I walked home from the record shop in Crouch End with a paper bag under my arm. The bag always damp from the weather always the color of weak tea. Amber, sodium light pooled on the wet pavement. A bus would sigh past me at the corner. A dog would bark from a window. London does not announce its kindnesses, it mutters them. My flat was small and well kept. The walls were lined floor to ceiling with LPs, alphabetized the way other men sort their conscience. A turntable sat on the lowest shelf, a single warm lamp on the kitchen table, a kettle that whistled too long because I never quite got round to mending it. On the kitchen shelf above the kettle, behind a cracked mug from Margate, sat a small wooden box. Oak, the size of a paperback. Old. Inside the box was a notebook, a soft brown leather cover, a 5-lined paper foxed at the edges. The earliest entry was dated August 1978, a Tuesday I cannot remember, but the page can. Half the notebook was full of my own handwriting, chord charts, scraps of verse, the kind of nightly weather a working musician keeps. A few pages near the middle had been torn out. The torn edges were still visible, jagged and a little hopeful, the way torn pages always look as though they expect to come home. I wore the key to the box on a thin leather cord around my neck. Brass, small enough to disappear under a shirt, heavy enough to remind me it was there. Every evening, before I lowered a needle onto any record, I performed the same small ceremony, turned the brass key, opened the box, lift out the notebook, uncap the fountain pen Beatrice had given me for my 50th birthday. Write one sentence by lamplight. One line, that was the rule. Anything more felt like begging the past to come back. And I had given up begging some years before. Then I would close the notebook, lock the box, hang the key around my neck, and only then would I lower the tone arm onto side B of a 1986 LP, pressing of 500 copies, my own name on the cream label in dark green ink. Tin-Hearted. Track 4, the slow one, a gentle little guitar piece I had written for a woman who, by 2013, had been gone from my life for 22 years and from the world for 9. I would close my eyes. The first notes would find me. And for 3 minutes and 41 seconds, I would be the man on the record, and the man at the kitchen table, and the man in some far quieter room I had not yet been let into. That was the ritual. That was how I held the line.
Dad, you eat tonight. Don't lie to me. I know you didn't. You never do when it gets like this. Toast is not a meal. It is a postponement. I'm coming Sunday. I'll bring that soup from the place by the station, the one with the thick bread. You always say you don't want it, and then you eat all of it. Don't argue with me.
I won't argue. Toast is what tea aspires to when it grows up, which makes it aspirational rather than negligent. I am quite all right, Bea. I promise you that. I'll see you Sunday, and I will eat something beforehand that is warm and round and not flat, so you can pretend to believe me. She rang off. I sat at the kitchen table with the notebook still open in front of me. I told myself she only came out of guilt, that she was checking up on the old man the way you check the smoke alarm in a hallway you no longer live in. I told myself that, and I believed it, and I would learn later, in a dark hallway smelling faintly of tea and rain, how wrong I had been. The shop in Crouch End was called Bensley & Son Records, although the son had emigrated to Adelaide in 1991, and the sign had outlived the family. The proprietor was Arthur Bensley, 71, bald on top, white fringe at the sides, wire glasses on a chain that he never used to read with, only to look over. He had been a bass player in 3 failed bands in the 1960s and a successful shopkeeper in one stubborn shop ever since. His wife had died in 2007. He had not changed the backroom kettle since.
You're late, Calverton. 3 minutes, if you want to be precise, which you usually do. Tea's on the side. Your mug? The plain blue one, not that stupid novelty mug your daughter sent. I put 2 sugars in yours today. Don't argue. You looked like a 2-sugar morning the moment you came through the door. I have run this counter for 40 years. I know what a 2-sugar morning looks like. I know what a 3-sugar morning looks like. And I know what a man looks like when he has been sitting in the dark with his own thoughts, which is a different thing entirely.
That was Arthur, a man who said affection in the language of hot drinks. I stocked the shelves, dusted the sleeves, alphabetized the new arrivals in the jazz bin, all of it in the kind of companionable silence that only 2 old men in a half-empty room can really manage. The shop smelled of cardboard, dust, and the warm electrical hum of an amplifier left on too long. It smelled, in other words, like everything I had spent my life inside. It was a Thursday morning when she walked in. Mid-October, I would say. The bell over the door gave its little tin chime, and a young woman in a cream blazer stepped in, sleek silver laptop bag on her shoulder, round tortoiseshell glasses, a high ponytail. She was 28 years old, and she had never, in her short professional life, had to wait for anything to load.
Hi, are you open? I wanted to ask. I'm looking for something vinyl, something with a story behind it, if that makes sense. Something authentic, not the obvious stuff. I love this place actually. It's incredible. It feels like stepping into a proper film set. Like everything in here is exactly where it's supposed to be. Do you have anything from the early 80s? British. I'm not sure what I want exactly, but I'll know it when I see it.
She picked 3 records almost at random. A Coltrane she would not listen to, a Joni Mitchell she would not understand, a Pink Floyd because everyone buys a Pink Floyd at some point. She paid in contactless, thanked us brightly, and left a perfume in the doorway that smelled of an office I had never worked in. I watched the door swing shut. The brass bell shivered. Outside, the rain had started up again. She'd be back. They always come back, eventually when they smell something they cannot replicate. Arthur stood beside me at the till for a long moment after the bell had stopped. He took a sip of his tea. He looked at the 3 records she had bought as though they were guests who had not quite arrived. Then he said, without looking at me,
40 years on this counter, and they still walk in, not knowing who you are, not who you were, not what you put into those records. She walked out with a Pink Floyd because she thinks that is what analog sounds like. It is not all right. But there is no use saying so before the kettle is even on, and it is not even on.
I think back now on that small bell, that small rain. Arthur stood with his tea growing cold because he could not bear to lift it. I did not see what he was already seeing. I did not see Priya's silver laptop sitting on the counter like a small clean knife. I did not see the soft navy jumper of a man who was, at that moment, putting his children to bed in Tottenham. I only saw the rain. She came back 2 weeks later. This time she did not pretend to browse. This time she set the silver laptop on the counter, slid it round to face me, and tapped the trackpad like a doctor tapping the bell of a knee.
I did some research on you, Mr. Calverton. 2 LPs, one of them really critically well received at the time. 20 years on the pub circuit, session work, co-writes. And then you just... what? You walked away. Look, I work for a streaming platform, and we have a vertical for heritage artists. Rediscovered Britain, the whole analog resurgence. We could get your back catalogue uploaded, get you on the curated playlists, lean into the analog grandfather aesthetic. TikTok content of you behind the counter. Authentic, wholesome, it would do numbers.
After a long beat, I told her. I didn't stop. The room stopped. There's a difference. She didn't understand the distinction. I was not sure I did either. She left. Arthur watched her go. He said she meant well. I said most knives mean well in the hand of a good cook. He told me to drink my tea. I drank it. That night at home, I opened the old laptop Beatrice had bought me 3 Christmases earlier. I clicked through the streaming dashboard the way a man steps onto thin ice he is told is safe. There it was, 10-hearted, 1,986, 47 monthly listeners. 47, not enough to fill the back room of the cricketers on a Wednesday in 1,989, not enough to make a record company telephone ring. Enough just to remind me that somewhere in the world 47 people were still listening to a man I no longer was. I closed the laptop. I opened the notebook. I wrote one sentence by lamplight. The sentence was, 47 strangers. Then I locked the box. I did not play a record that night. 3 days later, Priya brought 2 of her colleagues to the shop. A young man with a beard, he was clearly still learning, and a young woman holding a phone like it was a candle. They wandered the bins. They lifted sleeves at arm's length the way you lift something from a charity shop. I was in the back hallway carrying 2 mugs of tea, hot, almost too full to walk with, and the door to the front room stood half open.
Oh, this is so the place. It's like a really cute, quaint toy of a place, isn't it? Like a little museum.
Granddad Core. We could do a whole content series here.
I stood in the hallway with the 2 mugs in my hands, and I did not move. I cannot tell you for how long. Long enough for the tea to begin steaming the underside of my jaw. Long enough for one truth to lower itself, very gently, onto my shoulders. Granddad Core, a quaint toy of a place. The room I had spent 38 years inside, the room where Arthur kept his wife's photograph in the till drawer, the room where I had buried half the years of my one and only life, was to them a charming little prop. I walked into the front. I set Arthur's mug on the counter. He looked at me. He looked at the 3 of them. He said nothing. But when I came back 10 minutes later from the stockroom, he had put a 3rd spoon of sugar in my tea. I have never in my life liked sugar in my tea. I drank it anyway. Sunday, Beatrice came up from Brighton with a tub of soup and a paper bag of bread. She sat at the kitchen table opposite me with that long, careful look she had inherited from her mother, the one that arrives at your face before her words do.
You've lost weight, Dad. And I don't mean that in a good way. I mean it in the way where your cardigan is hanging off you and you haven't noticed. Come to Brighton. The flat above the garage is empty, just sitting there. You'd hear the sea in the morning. You'd have proper meals. Someone to eat them with, not be on your feet 8 hours at the shop. I'm asking because I want you there in my life properly, not because I'm checking up on you like you're a smoke alarm.
I'm not your charity, Bea. I know you mean it kindly. I'm sorry. I'm tired and I said that wrong. I can't live in someone else's spare room. Not yet. Not while I can still climb my own stairs and make my own tea and put a record on at 11 o'clock at night without asking anyone's permission. She did not argue. She kissed the top of my head. She took her coat from the hook. She left the soup. She closed the door behind her, quietly, the way she had been closing doors after me since she was 10 years old. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. I did not write a sentence that night. I closed the notebook unopened and looked at it as though it were someone I had failed. Tuesday, the bell over the shop door rang at 11:30, and a man in a long black wool coat stepped in. Tall, lean, close-cropped ash-blonde hair, small silver hoop in his right ear, a leather notebook in his left breast pocket. He did not browse. He walked directly to the counter. He looked at me as though he had been told to look at me.
Mr. Calverton, my name is Tomasz Lindqvist. I run a small room in Hackney, the sounding room, 120 seats, acoustic only, no amplification. A man who heard you at the Hope and Anchor in 1989 sat in my office last spring and talked about you for an hour. He was not drinking. I would like to offer you a Friday slot in February. Paid. 1 man, 1 guitar, 1 voice. You play whatever you would play in your own kitchen on a Thursday evening, no more, no less. I know you have not played a proper room in a long time. That is precisely why I am asking you and not someone else.
I held the mug of tea in my hand and quite forgot it was there. I looked across at Arthur, who was sitting on the high stool by the till with his glasses slipped to the end of his nose, pretending very hard to read a stock ledger. He looked up at me over the glasses. He gave me one small nod, just one. That nod had 35 years of friendship folded into it. I said, all right, Friday the 14th of February. Yes. Tomasz left. Arthur cleared his throat once and said, without looking up, that it was about bloody time. I tried to practice that evening. I set out the old Martin on the bed, propped the 1986 LP on the turntable so I could hear the chord shapes I had abandoned. The young man on the record began to sing. I, 62, sat on the edge of the bed with my fingers refusing to find the second chord of a song I had written when I was 35. I had spent 27 years trying to live up to a recording of myself. I had never noticed how exhausting that was. I told myself to come on, that it was only a chord. It was the same chord it had always been. I put the guitar down anyway. I did not write a sentence that night either. I lay awake until 2 in the morning. A fox gave its short, terrible cry over by the railway. I thought of the boy in Camden who had written Tin-Hearted in one long afternoon in 1985 with a borrowed guitar. Certainty, even bad certainty, has a kind of warmth to it. By 62, I was no longer certain of anything except the kettle and the cord and the brass key, and one of the 3 was about to come undone. In the morning, I went to the shop. I did not tell Arthur about the practice. He looked at me once over his glasses and put 3 biscuits next to my tea instead of the usual one. Some kindnesses you do not need to ask for. Some kindnesses arrive on a small saucer beside the kettle. Thursday, lunchtime. Arthur was eating a sausage roll at the till. Priya came in, full of bright triumph, and laid her phone face up on the counter.
Mr. Calverton, don't be cross, please. Just hear me out before you say anything. I posted a 30-second clip on the company channel last Friday of you humming behind the counter while you were relieving the jazz section. He didn't notice. There was nothing dodgy about it. It was just you, in your cardigan, humming a melody with your eyes down. 12,000 plays in under a day. I know. I should have asked. I didn't. But 12,000 people heard something in it, and I think you should know that.
I looked at the screen. There I was, in my charcoal cardigan, dust on my sleeves, humming a melody I had not realized I was humming. Underneath, comments scrolled past in tidy blue typeface. Wholesome. Grandad Core. Icon of forgotten Britain. He is everything, save analog Britain. So pure. Adopt him. I set the phone gently back on the counter. I took my coat from the hook. I did not look at Arthur. I did not look at Priya. I walked out of the shop into rain that had been waiting for me. I walked home with my hands in my pockets, and my hands found the brass key on its cord, and the brass key was very cold. I had forgotten my jumper at the shop, the thick one. The one Beatrice had knitted me when she was 19 and the wool was uneven. I went back at 9:30 in the evening, in heavier rain, because I did not want Arthur to lock up over it. The shop was dark from the street. The light was on in the back room only, a thin slice of yellow under the door. I let myself in with my own key. I did not call out. I do not know why. Perhaps because the slice of light was very thin, and I did not want to break it. Perhaps because Arthur's voice was already coming through the door.
Love. I told you, he cannot know. 6 months you've been keeping the lights on for him. 6 months. I'm not letting him find out and feel small. He needs a place to matter. That's all he's got. If you tell him, he'll walk out that door tomorrow and he won't come back. I know him. I have known him longer than you've been alive, love. Let me have this. Let him have this. I know, love. I know. You're a good girl. He was happy tonight. Did you know that? He wouldn't say so. He doesn't say so. But I saw him with the new arrivals this afternoon. You know the way he goes when something catches him? The way his hands slow right down. He was happy. Don't you take that away from him. Your dad is a stubborn old fool, and he is the last serious musician I have left in this building, and that is not nothing. Let him be the last one. Yes. All right. Sunday. Yes. Good night, love.
I stood in the dark hallway. My hand was resting on the doorframe. I had not breathed in, I do not know how long. 6 months. My daughter. The daughter I had told myself came only out of duty. The daughter I had snapped at across the kitchen table on Sunday. She had been paying my employer for 6 months to keep me employed. And Arthur, whom I had thought kept me on out of pity, had been refusing to tell me, because he understood, better than I did, what would happen if I knew. The cruelty I thought I had been hearing from the world was a kindness I had been mishearing. Both of these people had been holding the air around me steady with their bare hands in a dark hallway while I told them how cold the air was. I did not go into the back room. I lifted my jumper from the hook by the front door, very quietly, and I let myself out into the rain. I walked home the long way. I did not feel the rain. At the corner of my own street, I had to stop under a street lamp and lean my forehead against the lamppost. The metal was cold and the cold was honest, and I needed something honest. At home, I did not turn on the kitchen light. I sat down at the table. I lifted the cord from my neck. I unlocked the box. I lifted out the notebook. I uncapped the pen. And for the first time in 9 years, I did not write a single sentence. I wrote a paragraph. Then I wrote another. The fountain pen moved across the page the way a hand moves across the face of someone you have not touched in too long. I wrote about Arthur's broken nose. I wrote about Beatrice's small hands turning the pages of a song I had written for her when she was 4. I wrote about a cup of tea. 2 sugars on a 1 sugar morning. I wrote until the lamp got hot. When I finally closed the book, the spine cracked a little. the way a back cracks when it has been bowed too long. I did not lock the box that night. I left it open on the kitchen table. I went to bed. I did not play the record. I did not sleep. I lay and thought of Beatrice at 4, sitting cross-legged on my knee while I worked out a chord. She had reached up and put her small hand over mine on the fretboard, as if to slow me down. I had forgotten the gesture by morning. She had not. By sunrise, I knew what I was inside. There is a particular kind of shame that arrives only after a particular kind of love. 3 days before the gig, my confidence collapsed. There is no other word for it. It collapsed the way an old roof collapses, slowly. Then all at once, in a single afternoon of small noises. I sat at the kitchen table with a sheet of paper, a stamp, an envelope already addressed. T. Lindqvist, The Sounding Room, Hackney. I sat down. I wrote a letter in a voice I had not used in a long time, which is to say, a defeated one. Dear Mr. Lindqvist, I am sorry to say I am no longer able. The dates have grown unkind. I thank you with all my heart for the chance. Miles Calverton. I sealed the envelope. I leaned it against the brass key I had been hanging on a hook by the door since the night in the rain. I opened the notebook. I wrote one sentence. The sentence was, I'm sorry. 3 days before the gig, I had decided that the kindest thing I could do for my own music was to bury it before someone else did. I went to bed. I did not sleep. The clock on the bedroom wall sounded, that night, like a man tapping at a door. She came at 8 in the morning, unannounced. She had driven up from Brighton through fog so thick the lorries on the A23 had their hazard lights blinking like wet stars. She stood at my kitchen door in her woolen scarf, her auburn hair frizzed by the weather, her face the careful face of a woman who has rehearsed 3 speeches and decided to give none of them. She said only 3 words, Dad, sit. She made the tea. She set my mug in front of me. She sat down opposite. She looked at the envelope leaning against the brass key, and she looked at me, and she did not pretend she had not seen it.
I know you heard us. Arthur told me you were in the dark hallway, and I'm glad he did, because I would have told you anyway. Yes, I have been paying the shop's electricity bill for 6 months. I will keep paying it for as long as it needs paying, and I don't want to talk about it as a transaction because it isn't one. I did it because, when I was 4 years old, you sat on the edge of my bed in the dark and played me the song about the tin-hearted boy and his bird, and I have never, not once in my life, forgotten the way your voice sounded under my pillow. It is the first music I remember. It is the reason I believe in music, and I will not stand by and watch the world tell you that voice no longer counts. Because it does. It counts to me. It has always counted to me. Please, let one room hear you, one more time, the way you like to be heard. No phones, no metrics, just one room full of people sitting quietly in the dark.
She reached across the table. She did not take my hand. She picked up the envelope. She tore it once, twice, 3 times, 4. She set the 4 pieces on the table between us. Her hands were shaking. So were mine. I said, all right. 1 room. She kissed the top of my head. She left at 9:30. I sat with the 4 pieces of envelope on the table and the brass key on the hook by the door and the notebook open on the page that said, "I'm sorry." I tore that page out. I did not throw it away. I folded it. I put it in my pocket. I would carry it through the gig. Some apologies want to be carried. I practiced that afternoon. I practiced the next morning. I practiced the next night. I did not record any of it. I did not film any of it. I did not put any of it on the laptop. I let my hands remember what my hands remembered. By the Thursday evening before the gig, the second chord of Tin Hearted had returned to me as quietly as a cat returns to a kitchen window. I did not weep when it returned. I made it a cup of tea in my way. I played the chord 7 times in a row, very slowly, until the strings stopped being afraid of my fingers. Arthur came by on the Thursday evening. He brought a tin of biscuits and did not stay long. He stood in my hallway with his cap in his hands, and he said, in a voice that was not quite his usual voice,
If you're frightened on Friday, you look at the second row and you find me there. I'll be in my navy jumper with my tea flask, and I will not be frightened for you, because I will be too busy sitting with 35 years of knowing you and being proud of every year of it.
He coughed once before he left. He always coughed once before he said anything serious. By then I knew what the cough meant. By then, perhaps, I had finally learned to listen to the small grammars of people who loved me. Friday, the 14th of February, 2014. The Sounding Room, Hackney, a converted Methodist chapel from 1881. Vaulted ceiling, exposed brick, soft amber lamps in iron sconces, 120 wooden chairs. Tomasz greeted me at the side door with a single nod and 3 words, "Your room, Mr. Calverton." Arthur sat in the second row in his navy fisherman's jumper with a tartan tea flask in his lap. Beatrice sat in the third row in a cream cardigan that had been my late wife's. Priya sat in the very back row. She did not have her phone out. She did not have her laptop. She had a small notebook and a black pen. She did not look at me. She looked at her own knees. She was, would learn later, mortified. She had come not to film, but to listen. Around them, perhaps 70 other people, strangers mostly. A few faces I half recognized from old gigs. A man with a long gray beard in the front row who had, I thought, once played bass for me in 1987. A woman in a wheelchair on the aisle, a young couple with a child of perhaps 11, holding her father's hand. The amber lamps gave every face a color halfway between candlelight and skin. I tuned the Martin. My hands were shaking so hard I tuned the D string twice. The microphone was set low. There was a stool, a guitar, a glass of water, a single overhead amber spotlight. The room hushed before I had said a word. Real listening has a sound. It is not silence. It is a kind of leaning. Good evening. My name is Miles Calverton. I have not played a proper room in 19 years. Small dry chuckle. So if you'll forgive me, I'll begin and we will see what becomes of me. I played 4 songs. I will not tell you about the first 3. They were good. I was steady on the first, frightened on the second, found on the third, but the fourth song was track 4 of the 1986 LP. Tin-Hearted. I had not played it live in 27 years. I played it slower than the record. My voice cracked once on the second verse. I closed my eyes on the last chorus because there were too many people leaning forward and I did not want them to be embarrassed for me. When the last chord faded, no one clapped, not for 3 full seconds. I sat with my eyes still closed and I thought very calmly, I see. So this is how it ends. And then the room broke. Not loud, not theatrical. They clapped the way people clap in a small chapel when something has been given and received and acknowledged. Arthur was wiping his glasses on his jumper. Beatrice was not wiping her face. Priya was very still, looking finally at me, with the kind of look you cannot rehearse. I came off stage. Tomasz handed me a glass of water without a word. I sat on a wooden crate behind the curtain. My legs gave out mildly, and the crate caught me. I sat there for a long time. Slowly, the chairs began to scrape. Slowly, voices began to rise. The room emptied. I packed the guitar away with hands that were finally blessedly steady. When I came back out onto the half-lit stage to fetch my coat, the room was almost empty. Beatrice had come up the center aisle and was standing at the foot of the stage. She looked up at me. She did not say the things she had prepared to say. Instead, she said this.
The way you played the last song. The slow way. That was the right way. I didn't know that until I heard it tonight, and I should have known it years ago. It was never the record that was the point. It was the slowness. The way you made the room feel like there was nowhere else it needed to be, and I was frightened on the second song. Same as you. I could see it in your hands from the third row. Arthur cried on the second one. He'll deny it entirely. I was watching him the whole time, and he cried.
I laughed. It was a quiet laugh, the kind you do not play in. It felt like something old coming loose. Arthur and Tomasz were at the soundboard, talking in low voices. Priya was already gone. But in the third row, near the center aisle, one man was still seated. He had not moved. He had on a soft navy jumper and a brown corduroy jacket, steel-rimmed glasses, close-cropped black hair starting to gray at the temples, warm brown skin, a small worn leather wallet in his hands. He was looking down at the wallet. He was breathing slowly. He looked like a man who had rehearsed 17 years of words and was uncertain, at the last moment, where to begin. Tomasz, very quietly, stepped back into the shadow at the side of the room. The man stood. He walked, not quickly, up the center aisle towards the stage.
Mr. Calverton, my name is Sasha Ellsworth. You will not remember me. I have thought many times about what I would say to you if I ever found myself in the same room. I have been listening for 17 years to hear whether you were still playing somewhere, and tonight I am here. I would like, if you can spare a moment, to give you something back.
He opened the small worn leather wallet. He took out a folded square of paper, yellowed, soft from being carried. He unfolded it on his palm, slowly, the way you unfold something that has aged with you. He held it up so I could see. It was a page torn from a notebook. Lined paper, 4 lines of handwriting in fountain pen ink, faded a little to brown at the strokes. The handwriting was mine.
In 1996, I was 21. I had run from a house I should not have been raised in. I had nowhere to go. It was a Tuesday in November. I walked into a pub off the Holloway Road because the door was open and the lights were warm. You were playing. You stopped between sets. You bought me a cup of tea. You asked me my name. You sat with me for, I think, 11 minutes. I have counted. And then you took your notebook from your jacket pocket and you tore out a page and you wrote me these 4 lines. You said, take these. They might help. I have kept them in my wallet ever since. I am a music therapist now. I work at a children's hospice in Tottenham. I sit with children at the end of their lives. Sometimes their parents ask me to sing. Sometimes the children ask me to sing. I have, over the past 9 years, sung these 4 lines to 43 children. 43 at the end. Every single one. They went out of this world hearing your handwriting. Mr. Calverton, you have sung at hundreds of deathbeds. You never knew.
He held the page out. I could not move my hand. He waited. He waited the way a man waits at a hospital bedside, without hurry, without pressure, only present. After a long time, I lifted my hand. I took the page from him. My fingers closed around it. The paper was warm from his pocket. I could not speak. I did not try. He understood. He did the thing only the very tender do. He stepped back. He folded his hands in front of him. He said very quietly that he had wanted to say this to me since he was 21 years old. And then he said, "Thank you." Beatrice was at the front of the stage by then, not on it, just standing very still at the edge of the light. Arthur had come up behind her and laid one heavy hand on her shoulder. Tomasz was at the back of the room, motionless. Sasha turned. He walked, slowly, the way he had come, back up the aisle and out into the foyer. I did not call after him. He had not given me his telephone number. He had not asked for mine. He had not come for me to thank him. He had come because he had something of mine, and he wanted it to be in my hand again. Later, much later, at home, after Beatrice had finally gone to bed in the spare room, after the kettle had stopped, I sat at the kitchen table with the small wooden box open in front of me. I lifted the notebook out. I turned to the place where, in the spring of 1986, 4 pages had been torn unevenly from the spine. I laid Sasha's folded page against the torn edge of the page above it. The torn edges met. They fit. The little jagged tooth on the left of his page slotted exactly into the little jagged cup on the right of mine. The paper had been waiting in his pocket for 17 years to come home. The notebook had been waiting on a kitchen shelf in Walthamstow, locked under a brass key, for 17 years to receive it. I sat in the lamplight and I cried, very quietly, the way a man cries when he is not sad. 1 week later, a Saturday morning, The sky over Walthamstow was a soft, uncomplicated gray. I had not played a record since Friday the 14th. I had not, in fact, gone near the turntable. I had been waiting, I think, for the right kind of silence. I sat at the kitchen table. I opened the small wooden box. I lifted the notebook out. I placed Sasha's return page carefully, very carefully, back into the spine of the book, aligning the torn edge against the matching tooth of the page above. I pressed it flat with the palm of my hand. The book closed over it with a kind of small sigh I did not invent. I did not lock the box. I left it open. I lifted the cord from my neck, and I unhooked the small brass key, and I crossed the kitchen, and I hung the key on a little iron hook above the kettle that had been empty for 19 years. The key swung once, twice. Came to rest. I stood and looked at it for a long time. I stood there for a long time. I had spent 35 years keeping my handwriting safe. I had not noticed it had been keeping other people safe instead. Monday, the shop. The bell over the door gave its tin chime and Priya came in. No laptop, no phone in her hand, just a slim notebook tucked under one arm. She looked smaller than she had looked before, or perhaps she had stopped trying to look bigger. She walked to the counter.
Mr. Calverton, I deleted the clip Saturday morning before I'd even taken my coat off and before I'd had any coffee. I sat with it for a day and then I just deleted it because it was wrong of me to post it without asking, and I knew that before I did it, and I did it anyway. I am sorry. Not the marketing sorry, the company policy sorry, the actual one. I was wondering if you do another evening, could I come? Not to film, not to write about it, just to sit in a room and listen. Just that.
I said yes. She nodded. She turned. She went out into the rain that was by then becoming a different rain, softer, kinder, the rain of a city that had decided to forgive itself for the morning. Arthur, behind the counter, did not look up from his ledger, but the corner of his mouth moved, very slightly, in something that on his face counted as a smile. He said, without looking up, that it was about bloody time. 2 days later, the shop was quiet. 3:30, a Tuesday rain on the window. The bell above the door gave its small sound and Tomasz came in, the way Tomasz always came in, purposefully, without ceremony.
I have a proposal. Second Sunday of the month. My room. 30 people, no more. Acoustic only. You bring the notebook, the guitar, and whatever that wooden box means to you. I provide the chairs, the lamps, the door, and the heating. Free of charge for the audience. There is no recording equipment. There are no streaming links. What happens in that room stays in that room, which is exactly the kind of room you play in best. I ask only one thing. You call it something. Give it a name. Rooms without names close too quickly, and I do not want this one to close.
I said yes. I said it would be called Notebook Nights. He gave a single nod. Good, he said. Second Sunday, then. I'll put the chairs out. He left. Arthur, who had been listening from the back of the shop, came to stand beside me at the till. He did not say anything, did not need to. He simply stood there, the way good men stand beside things that are starting, which is to say, quietly, and close. Spring of 2014. I started something small, a monthly evening at the sounding room, the second Sunday of every month for the price of the heating bill. 30 people, never more, free to attend. The room was lit only by the iron sconces. At the front of the stage, on a low oak table, I placed the open wooden box. Inside it, the leather notebook, open on a different dated page each session. Beside it, a second notebook, this one blank, with a fountain pen on a silver chain. Anyone who came could read a page from the old book. Anyone could ask me to play a song from any dated entry. Anyone could write a line of their own into the new book. On the first notebook night, Sasha came. He brought 3 of his colleagues from the hospice. A small black woman in her 60s who had been a chorister all her life. A red-haired Irish woman in her 40s who had lost a son. A young Bangladeshi man with a guitar of his own. They sat together in the 3rd row, where Sasha had sat the first time. They read the pages of the old book between songs. They wrote their own lines into the new book during the interval. At the end of the evening, I read out 5 of the new lines, with permission. From a woman who did not give her name, my husband used to whistle when he washed the dishes. He has been gone 4 years. I had forgotten the whistle until I sat in this room tonight. From a man named David, my father played guitar. I never learned. I am 61. I would like to start. From a child named Anya, aged 8. Music is the only thing that makes my grandma not cry on Tuesdays. From a woman named Margaret, who wrote in very careful handwriting. I sang to my children every night for 12 years, and then they grew up and I thought that part of me was finished. Tonight I think perhaps it isn't. From a man who signed only his first name, Tomasz. I have not told anyone this. I used to play in a band when I was 22. I stopped because someone I trusted told me I wasn't good enough. I believed them for 39 years. After tonight, I am not sure I should have. From someone who left no name at all, only this. I came here because I was lonely. I am going home because I was heard. Thank you. Beatrice watched from the wing in her cream cardigan with her arms folded the way her mother used to fold her arms, which is to say not as a barrier, but as a held breath. Tomasz, in his usual black, stood by the soundboard, and at the end of the night he gave me one single Northern European nod, which on Tomasz's face was the same as another man putting both arms round you. I am 74 now. I am telling you this in the spring of 2025 from a small flat in Brighton, 3 streets from the sea, where my daughter has set me up on the ground floor because the stairs at Walthamstow finally won. Notebook Nights still runs. Sasha runs the Hackney chapter now. There are 7 other chapters across the country, 1 in Edinburgh, 1 in Belfast, 1 in a converted dairy outside Hereford, 1 in a community hall in Cardiff, 1 in a back room of a pub in Newcastle. The box still sits on a low oak table at the front of every room. The brass key still hangs on a hook above a kettle, although the kettle has changed twice. The notebook is no longer half full. It is, at last, the right kind of full. Arthur is 79, still in his shop in Crouch End. He employs a girl from East Finchley on Saturdays. He says she won't stay. I think he is wrong. Priya works for a small charity now. recording the voices of older Londoners before they are lost. She visits Arthur once a month with digestives he pretends not to want. Beatrice has a small daughter, Ivy, 2.5. Ivy has put her small hand on my hand on the fretboard, the way her mother once did. I have not, this time, forgotten. And so, if you are listening to this, if you have come to me this evening from a long day, a hard year, a quiet room, if you are in a season where the world has begun, gently, almost politely, to tell you that what you make by hand no longer counts, that what you carry no longer signifies, that your handwriting is a charming little prop, then I want you to do something for me. I want you to ask yourself one question, just the one. Whose pocket might your handwriting already be in, without you knowing? Whose Tuesday in November did you sit with for 11 minutes 17 years ago? What 4 lines did you tear out of yourself and hand to a stranger because the door of the pub was open and the lights were warm? You may not remember, you will not always be told, but the page will still be there, folded, yellowed at the creases, warm from a stranger's pocket. Waiting for the night, the room goes quiet. So do not bury it before someone else has the chance to hand it back to you. Do not lock the box. Do not throw the page. Do not delete the verse. Do not silence the kettle. Do not apologize for the long way you have walked to be a person who still makes things by hand. There is a hospice somewhere with your 4 lines hanging in the air above a child's pillow. There is a daughter somewhere paying the electricity bill because she remembers your voice under hers when she was 4. There is a stranger somewhere folding what you wrote into a wallet they will carry until 1,996 becomes 2,013 becomes the night your room finally leans forward. What the dusty record knew before I did was that nothing made by hand is ever really lost. It is only waiting in someone else's pocket.